Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Darrell. His IMDb page goes on for years. He's got decades experience in Hollywood as an actor, producer, writer. Produced the record-setting miniseries Hatfield and McCoys with Kevin Costner and Bill Paxton. He's got a new miniseries coming out. How many have already been?
It's out.
The whole series?
The Gray House. Yes, all 8 episodes.
All 8 episodes of The Gray House. It's
Number 9 on Amazon.
All right. Yeah, you know, it was number 5. Yeah. And one of the reasons I'm here is I'm trying to get you guys to watch it. So we get our numbers up. It was number 5 and it was number 3 in dramas.
So he came all the way from California to give us a talk about storytelling.
And see my family.
And see his family. And we're very grateful for that. So please give a warm welcome to Darrell Fetty.
Does this one work? Hello? Hello? No, it's not working? Give me that one. One you were using. I like, oh, that's
There you go.
magic. All right. Okay.
Okay, go.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I've done a lot of speaking, but I've not done a keynote address, so I hope this won't be too long, and I won't bore you guys. But I put in a lot of stuff, and so I printed out a talk here, so just start being restless and yawning when it start getting boring. So here goes. All right, the world needs storytellers. As author Salman Rushdie says in the promo for his writing masterclass, we need stories to understand ourselves. A newborn first needs love, safety, nourishment, and play. And then the next thing the kid wants is for you to tell him a story. From the very beginning of human history, when cavemen returned from the hunt and gathered around their campfire, there was this one excited Neanderthal who would jump up, stomp around the fire, and act out the story of the great hunt, probably wildly exaggerating his own expertise and bravery. My friend and mentor, John Milius, the iconic Hemingway-like screenwriter of such classics as Apocalypse Now, Conan the Barbarian, Dirty Harry, and Jaws. He always said that that's who he would have been had he lived back in those Cro-Magnon days. I was with John in pitch meetings, and he was pretty much a primeval force telling his story. Anyway, as our caveman was stomping around outside, telling how he brought down the great woolly mammoth, inside the cave, the calmer storytellers would be painting and carving out the narrative in pictures on the cave walls, thereby creating, thereby creating the first story pitch decks. Early humans required these stories of danger, courage, and cooperation to survive and to grow as a civilization. Whether it was the wisdom of an elder or a mistake that led to tragedy, story was instruction. Story was history. Story was identity. As the ancients advanced, developing tools, languages, and better weapons to kill each other, storytelling evolved into epic poetry and sacred texts. Works like Mesopotamia's The Epic of Gilgamesh explored friendship, mortality, and the meaning of life. Homer's Odyssey and Iliad carried cultural values across generations. These were not merely entertainments. These were the social glue. Stories became religion, law, myth, and moral compass. They shaped nations. Parables of spiritual teachers, legends of heroes, the founding myths of tribes. These narratives gave structure to chaos and helped humans wrestle with suffering, love, betrayal, hope, and death. They taught communities who they were, what they believed, and how they should live. In other words, like the title on our film festival poster, the world needs storytellers. Therefore, as writers and filmmakers, despite all the challenges, the obstacles, the hardships, and the rejections you will inevitably face before any success, and I'm here to tell you after any success, the world needs you. My story begins in a black backwoods holler along Mud River, not far from Good Hope Baptist Church, up Kilgore Creek when I was baptized when I was about 11 years old. At Wednesday night prayer meetings, I would sit slack-jawed and mouth-breathing, and beside my mother, when the 376-pound Ivan Woodard, his dirty bibbed overalls, stained from working in his tobacco fields all day, sunburned and still sweating, would tearfully jump up and testify about the good Lord's blessings, and got so happy he started shouting and jumping and crying and jumping around so forcefully that little wooden sanctuary would shake and jolt on its rock foundations like the earthquakes I would later experience in California. Then after Big Ivan had scared me half to death and made me pee just a little bit, Mrs. Elsie Clatterbuck would stand up to testify and ask for prayers for poor House Thornton, who was just told by Dr. Drake that she has an incurable disease and only 6 months to live. And also please pray for our sweet young newlywed Mary Beth, whose cat of a husband, Martin, just run off with that wicked Jezebel, Wendy Miller. And while everyone was nodding their heads and saying their amens in sympathy and agreement, my cynical, amused mother would lean down and whisper to me, those are current soap opera characters on Days of Our Lives this week. That TV story moved and affected Elsie so strongly she believed it was true. I didn't know then, but even at that very early age, I was accumulating stories and living my own story, some of which isn't all that funny, and like we've all experienced, some of it downright tragic, which I will not talk about today, but may have already channeled into some of my work. West Virginia has a strong heritage and a rich tradition of storytelling rooted in Appalachian culture. Before TV, radio, and the internet, stories, written or oral, were the primary way people shared history, humor, and community values in the mountains. People would gather at the church socials, on front porches in summer, and in the wintertime around wood stoves, in my case, coal stoves. Stories were told to entertain, but also to pass down knowledge about family history, local legends, tall tales, hunting and survival experiences, scary ghost stories, upsetting stories about politics and politicians, and funny stories about their crazy neighbors and relatives. But getting back to my story, before I went to Milton High School and graduated from Marshall University, I attended a one-room schoolhouse in Balls Gap, West Virginia, where hillbilly bully in training Ricky Johnson would beat me up about every other day before he finally quit school and joined the Army, where he could fight people and get paid for it. Nonetheless, I went on to graduate at the top of my class from Balls Gap Elementary, and bottom of my class, since I was the only one left in the 6th grade at that time. My dad was a gospel singer who made me take piano lessons at 8 years old so I could accompany his gospel quartet and play for my cousin's wedding and for the Good Hope Church Choir. I was about 13 when all that backfired on him because I discovered soul music, the psychedelic revolution, and started playing rock and roll. Besides school assignments, the first real writing I ever did was about just that. It was a college assignment that my Marshall University writing professor, Paige Pitt, submitted to the Huntington Herald-Dispatch, who published it as a featured Sunday article about some of my exploits as a hippie rocker during those very divided and turbulent late 60s, while I was playing psychedelic soul in places like Naugatuck, West Virginia, Ironton, Ohio, and Hazard, Kentucky. It was a hazard where I had to talk my way out of getting beat up and had a gun poked in my ribs and in my face just because at that time I had long hair and a beard, which in those days supposedly meant that my politics were the polar opposite of what everyone with short hair might believe. These were good lessons in ignorance, illogical prejudices, and undeserved discrimination based on how one looks. I wasn't much into politics then, but as I learned more about political divides and racial hatred from the news during college war protests, and when I was traveling with Bernie, my saxophone player in my band, and some other black friends, it was hard not to form an opinion. I didn't know it then, but all those experiences, my stories, were seeds being planted that would grow into a passion to tell other stories, some about bigotry and racial hatred, like the Gray House, for instance. My current series now streaming on Amazon Prime, which you should watch to help keep our numbers up. We're in the top 10, as someone said a while ago. We were number 5 overall. I already said that. So if you guys watch it, it'll bring our numbers up. But most importantly, help me get another job. But more than that hoped-for marketing success, I always believed in this story. It's about marginalized women and people of color who made a difference and didn't get any credit for it. Okay, blatant commercial and self-promo done. We now go back to Hollywood. About 2 months after graduating from Marshall, I packed up my 1962 Oldsmobile hoopty with a pup tent, sleeping bag, all the canned goods I could steal from my dad, and with my aspiring model girlfriend, Caroline McCoy, a direct descendant of the Hatfields and McCoys, who would later become my first wife and inspiration, we set out on Route 66 to California, camping out along the way because we couldn't afford a hotel room. My goal then was to become a movie star. I mean, having been a star at Balls Gap, Good Hope Baptist Church, and Milton High School, and Marshall University plays, I knew I was a pretty good actor. So I figured that career path should be pretty easy. Besides, I always had rock and roll to fall back on. All I had to do was let Hollywood see me do my thing and magic would happen. Well, After Caroline and I got bilked out of all of our money by a couple of Hollywood scams, she got a job in a clothing store, and one of the sales girls there had a girlfriend who worked in the personnel department of a real Hollywood studio. And she said I could apply for a mailroom job there. That was American International Pictures, as we were just discussing. AIP, a low-budget studio known for cheap horror movies, beach party, and biker flicks. AIP helped launch the careers of such famous icons as Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, and Jack Nicholson, and yours truly. When I got there in 1970, AIP was just getting into blaxploitation, inexpensive made films for urban audiences like Shaft, Superfly, and Foxy Brown, which is why the very first acting gig I ever got was portraying a victim of a vampire called Blackula. While I was working this mailroom gig, I was also pursuing an acting career in every way possible. Acting classes, theater, experimental films, all while trying to get to know as many aspiring filmmakers as possible, like all of you. I acted in student films, in independent films, at the American Film Institute, UCLA, and USC, where, among other filmmakers there, I met Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, a writing team at that time known as the Bobs, and who I introduced to John Milius, who in turn introduced them to Steven Spielberg, who gave them their first Hollywood jobs, one of which was Back to the Future. After which, Zemeckis went on to direct Who Framed Roger Rabbit, The Polar Express, Forrest Gump, and many, many more major motion pictures. During that era, I was kind of like Forrest Gump myself. I was the Forrest Gump of Hollywood. I was at the very first studio screenings of Star Wars, Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was with Milius when he was dictating dialogue on the phone to Spielberg and in editing rooms with him and Coppola, and fetching clam chowder for them when they were writing Apocalypse Now, and having memorable dinners with George Lucas, Warren Oates, and others of that era. I was an actor in the last movie made by Orson Welles, The Other Side of the Wind, and in 2 movies with the legendary actor-director John Huston. I was also writing MTV rock videos at that time for the Ramones, the Blasters, Bangles, and other groups, and I was in a few rock bands with other aspiring actors, musicians, and even a few TV stars of those days, like my late friend David Carradine, star of Kung Fu and Kill Bill, his movie actor brother Keith, and then their youngest brother. Bobby Carradine, a versatile actor, a great guitar player, and a really good guy who recently broke my heart and a lot of others when he decided to leave this world. But I digress. By the way, this particular life narrative, in this narrative, I'm jumping back and forth, playing around the story structure, putting in flashbacks, flash forwards, jump cuts, montages, and non sequiturs. I'm not certain of this because I only read about it, but it may be a little bit like what my buddy Adam Jones was teaching this morning about nonlinear construction and his screenplay, his writer's toolkit class. But as Adam may or may not have told you, you should probably learn some of the basic rules of screenwriters before you start breaking them, which is one of the things I was going to talk about today. Besides just talking about myself, I will also talk a little about traditional story structure. And like Adam did this morning, try to give you as storytellers some information you might actually be able to use. Frankly, in addition to this embarrassing ego trip down memory lane, I will also attempt to cleverly and subversively show you in my personal story an example of what mythologist Joseph Campbell called the hero's journey, which is the story of every human being journeys through life, no matter what you do, where you are, what goals you pursue. Okay, now we jump back to American International Pictures. I'm working in the AIP mailroom. This was before the internet, so in addition to old-fashioned snail mail, I would deliver inter-office memos and telegrams. A telegram was basically a text message. I can't believe I have to explain this. Which was delivered on a small piece of paper, and which the person delivering it could read. And I did. On my way to delivering these important messages to the studio executives, I read and learned everything that was going on in the company. One day, a telegram came from London about a film production featuring several different rock bands. The English producer wanted to know in what order these bands should be listed on the movie poster in terms of popularity, which were the most well-known in America. Well, as a young rock and roll aficionado, I knew this, but all I was supposed to do was deliver that telegram. Now the head of AIP at that time was the original founder and all-powerful #1 executive, Mr. Sam Arkoff. Sam was the very epitome of the cliche, tough and gruff, temperamental, cigar-chomping studio boss. His primary gatekeeper was his equally tough and gruff executive secretary, Marge. Marge's station was an inner office right outside Mr. Arkoff's door, while right outside her door was an outer office where her gatekeeper, the beautiful young assistant Julie, sat at her desk. Julie kind of liked me. Marge did not. So I say to Julie, I have a telegram from Mr. Arkoff. Julie smiles, nods her shrugs and nods her head and goes back to her magazine. I see Mr. Arkoff pacing and smoking his cigar in his inner sanctum office. So I walk right through Marge's office into the boss's big office, and I hand him the telegram. As I do, I tell him how I think these different acts should be built and in what order. Sam Arkoff kind of grunts, takes the telegram, and I exit to the elevator, to the mailroom on the lowest floor. I'm there maybe 2 minutes. The inner office phone rings. Charlie, the head of the mailroom, picks up. Yes, ma'am. Charlie hangs up the phone, looks at me and says, Darrell, you're fired. Marge says you barged right into Mr. Arkoff's office without her permission, and now you need to go. Get your stuff and get out. Now remember, this is my first job in a big city. My wife Caroline and I were already struggling, and we would not be able to survive without it. And I had screwed up and lost it. But there was nothing else to do but gather up my personal effects and put on my coat and leave. As I was starting out, The phone rings again. Charlie picks up again. Yes, sir. Charlie hangs up, looks at me, and says, Mr. Arkoff wants you upstairs in the story department. He's hiring you to be a studio story analyst. So, as such, my new job was to read submitted screenplays, write coverage of the material, and my recommendation for making the movie or rejecting it. I would eventually read hundreds of screenplays and submitted books for development and write about them. This is how I learned to write screenplays, by the way. I read so many. At some point, I looked at them and thought, I can write something as bad as that. Anyway, this was a big responsibility for somebody who jumped off the turnip truck and didn't know anything. But you know what? That was okay, because one of the most often quoted lines about Hollywood is from William Goldman, super successful screenwriter of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Princess Bride, and a number of other great movie blockbusters. His observation of Hollywood, and I'm here to tell you it's true, nobody knows anything. In other words, everyone's path is different. We're all just learning as we go. So as we say in 12-step programs, I'm just here to share my experience, strength, and hope. I may be able to give you a few tips, some ideas about story structure, theme, and character development, but I do not have the secret formula for success. No one does. You gotta find your own way. Just as all the great storytellers of the past have done, as they say, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And speaking of giant and famous filmmakers, during my first years at AIP's story department, George Lucas submitted a couple of scripts. The first was for his coming-of-age movie, American Graffiti, which I loved and recommended, but AIP turned down because, as my supervising executive confidently informed me, America does not understand satire. Well, apparently, America did understand, because that was a huge success, going on to make millions and launching the careers of all its actors, including Harrison Ford, Ron Howard, Cindy Williams, and one of my best friends, Candy Clark, who was nominated for an Academy Award that year for her role in American Graffiti. The second George Lucas script I read was Star Wars, which AIP and most of the other studios around town also rejected. See? Nobody knows anything. I will talk more about Star Wars a little later, but before that, let's go to the 4th century BCE for Aristotle's Poetics and his storytelling model, which has been used by storytellers ever since. From Shakespeare to novelists to old Hollywood screenwriters to newer ones like Ryan Coogler, Paul Michael Anderson, Greta Gerwig, and Christopher Nolan. This is the basic 3-act structure, which I just demonstrated in my personal mailroom story. Act 1, the setup, introduces the world, the characters, and the conflict, i.e., starving Hollywood wannabe mailroom guy wants to get ahead. He's stopped by obstacles and gatekeepers. This act ends with an inciting incident, an opportunity to deliver a telegram and demonstrate my experience pushing the story forward to Act 2, confrontation. I take a risk. I walk into the studio head's office and tell him what I think. The stakes raise, escalating tension, the midpoint twist, I get past Marge. But then there's the defeat, a metaphorical death. I get fired. Act 3, resolution. The final confrontation or climax resolves and the character changes. I get a better job. Like every story, we have a beginning, middle, and end. Most successful screenplays have the same basic guidelines, the three-act structure, combined with the hero's journey, which I'll talk about later. But because I'm jumping around ahead of myself again. For now, let's just get a little chronological. In 1863, German writer Gustav Freytag expanded Aristotle into a 5-part dramatic arc of exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. A little later, in 1895, French writer Georges Poulty proposed that there were only 36 basic dramatic situations in all stories. Most Hollywood films are only about 10 of these conflicts, and some screenplay analysts have narrowed it down to only about 5. I could go through the first 10. I don't know if I'm getting too long, but if you want me to, I'll keep going. 1, pursuit. Someone is chasing someone else, The Fugitive, Mad Max, Fury Road. 2, vengeance. A crime pursued by vengeance. A character seeks revenge for a crime or injustice. A couple of examples are Gladiator and John Wick, and too many more to count. 3 is daring enterprise, a dangerous mission or impossible task. Mission Impossible, Ocean's 11, and all the other sequels. 4, the enigma, a mystery that must be solved, like 7, Knives Out, every cop show on TV, medical and true life mysteries. 5, obstacles to love. 2 people want to be together but face barriers. Titanic, The Notebook, Romeo and Juliet, Hatfields and McCoys. 6, ambition. A character seeks power or achievement. The Social Networks, Whiplash. 7, disaster. A catastrophe. Fate threatens multiple lives or the earth itself. Twisters, Don't Look Up, Independence Day, The Day After Tomorrow. 8, deliverance. Someone must be rescued. Taken, Saving Private Ryan, Last of the Mohegans. 9, rivalry. 2 characters compete for the same goal, Ford versus Ferrari, The Prestige. Recent films like The Challengers and Heated Rivalry also, they start as rivalry and evolved into something else. They evolved into romance. So you get a mix of genres there, a mix of plot types. Number 10, fatal imprudence. A character's mistake leads to tragedy, Jurassic Park and Oppenheimer. These types of conflicts are popular because they create clear stakes, conflict, and momentum. And Hollywood films like Heated Rivalry also combine 2 or 3 of these 36 situations at the same time. For example, The Dark Knight, pursuit plus vengeance plus enigma. Okay, as we move forward to our abbreviated history of story analysis, we come to 1946. That's when playwright Lejos Egri wrote his book, The Art of Dramatic Writing, maintaining that all stories start with a premise, a key idea that proves a moral or thematic statement, such as ambition leads to destruction, as in Scarface, There Will Be Blood, and Godfather. Greed leads to ruin, as in Wall Street, The Treasure of Sierra Madre, The Wolf of Wall Street. Revenge leads to tragedy, as in Gladiator, Kill Bill, and Godfather Part 2. True love leads to sacrifice, as in Titanic, Casablanca, The Notebook, Romeo and Juliet. Courage leads to victory, as in Braveheart, Star Wars, and Rocky. Arrogance leads to downfall, as in Top Gun, The Social Network, and A Few Good Men. Obsession leads to madness, as in Moby Dick, Black Swan, and The Shining. And hope leads to freedom, as in The Shawshank Redemption and Life is Beautiful. If plot is what happens, and character is who it happens to, then theme is the moral equation of that story. That is, this particular behavior leads to that particular consequence. Your story's theme is something that you should ask yourself anytime you're writing anything. What exactly are you trying to say? Here are the themes for all 10 of the current Academy Award nominated movies, which we will be seeing tomorrow night on the Oscar telecast, where they will not be talking about anything that I'm talking about to you today. Number 1, Begonia. Theme, paranoia leads to destruction. 2 conspiracy-obsessed men kidnap a CEO they believe is an alien, turning fear and mistrust into chaos. 2, F1, which is one of the most traditional story structures, by the way. The theme is past trauma leads to redemption when courage is rediscovered. A retired racing driver confronts his past and mentors a young driver while chasing one last victory. 3, Frankenstein. Theme, playing God leads to tragedy. The death of human ambition to create life unleashes suffering and moral consequences. Hamlet. Theme, grief leads to art. Human ambition to create life unleashes suffering. The death of Shakespeare's son shapes the emotional world that inspires Hamlet, perhaps his greatest work. 5, Marty Supreme, another current movie that follows more of the traditional storytelling. It's a sports movie. The theme is obsession with greatness leads to self-reinvention. A chaotic sports prodigy fights to define himself in a world of ambition and excess. I never would have guessed that there'd be a major movie about ping pong. But it's good. Number 6, one battle after another. Theme, political chaos leads to unlikely heroism. Ordinary people caught up in upheaval are forced into moral choices about loyalty and resistance. 7, the secret agent. Theme, living under tyranny leads to moral compromise. A man hiding from a dictatorship discovers survival demands difficult choices. 8, sentimental value. Theme, unresolved family wounds lead to generational conflict. A filmmaker and his daughter confront the emotional cost of turning life into art. 9, sinners. Theme, oppression leads to rebellion. In the Jim Crow South, supernatural horror becomes a metaphor for racism and survival. 10, train dreams. The theme is isolation leads to quiet resilience. A solitary laborer's life reflects the loneliness, endurance of the American frontier. If you look at the Oscar nominees this year and every year, they're wildly different, but almost every one can still be reduced to a simple dramatic equation. Certain human behaviors lead to specific consequences. So now we come to my era, the 1970s, when movie professional Sid Field, like me at the time at AIP, he was reading dozens and dozens of screenplays submitted to his production companies. He found that the most successful films did follow Aristotle's 3-act structure: setup, confrontation, and resolution, but with key turning points, plot points, that move the story from one act to the next. Sid said that a strong screenplay is built on 1, a clear protagonist with a goal; 2, conflict and obstacles that escalate; 3, major plot points that shift the story's direction. Published in 1979, the book became a foundational text in film schools and helped standardize how modern Hollywood screenplays are structured. always feeling that I was in over my head when I was transitioning from acting to writing. I, of course, read Sid's book, and as more and more screenwriting seminars were offered, I took classes from Robert McKee, John Truby, Michael Haig, and several more. After all, I was getting writing jobs, and I figured I'd better find out what the hell I was doing. Michael Haig teaches that the primary goal of a screenwriter, of a storyteller, is to elicit emotion. We must create a positive response in our audience. Your objective as a screenwriter is to get the audience to feel something, and maybe sometimes even get them to think. Haig emphasizes that every good story has character, desire, and conflict. We must have an emotionally involving character pursuing a compelling desire who meets seemingly impossible obstacles and seeks to overcome them in order to achieve his, her, or their desire. This character, our protagonist, should be someone we root for, who drives the action forward as we empathize with him. We need to have a psychological connection to our hero. Haig points out there are 5 different ways to do that. 1, we create sympathy for our hero. We feel sorry for him by making him a victim of some undeserved misfortune. 2, we put our hero in jeopardy. We worry about someone when their life is in danger and there's a threat of some major loss. 3, we make the character likable and show that he's well-liked by other characters. 4, we make him funny. 5, you make him good at what he does. Like tough guy Liam Neeson in Taken. I don't have the money, but what I do have is a particular set of skills I have acquired over a very long career. It's been proven that as audiences, we empathize with people who are really good at what they do. Be they really talented or, like Liam, really skilled. For our hero's goals, Haig says that 90% of all Hollywood movies are built on not 36 situations, not 10 dramatic goals, as I previously outlined, but only 4 visible desires. This is 90% of movies. To win, to escape, to stop, as in stopping something bad from happening, like the end of the world. Or number 4, to retrieve, i.e. a hero's quest to get something and bring it back. This specific goal is our hero's outer motivation, in which we can see a visible finish line. But a great, well-rounded hero must also have an inner motivation that the hero probably will not even acknowledge. He needs to resolve some inner wound and learn how to accept himself, to undergo some character transformation. Which brings me to the storytelling teacher about transformation who influenced and affected me the most, writer, professor, mythologist Joseph Campbell. As students of film, I would guess that many of you are already familiar with the hero's journey as a story structure model. It's been embedded in our culture ever since George Lucas, and he used that classic formula to write his revolutionary sci-fi adventure film Star Wars. If you're not familiar, here's a little history. In the early 1970s, while I was delivering mail during the day and playing rock and roll and getting naked on the stage in avant-garde theater productions, at night, George Lucas was trying to write a modern myth, something that felt timeless but fresh. He studied myths, fairy tales, world religions, and read Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. In it, Campbell argued that across cultures and across centuries, myths share a common structure, what he called the monomyth. After years of reading and study, Campbell, he went off for 5 years. He retired and just lived in the woods like Thoreau or Emerson or something. And he came up with this great book. He saw the progression that almost all stories share. A hero receives a call to adventure. He crosses into the unknown, faces trials, undergoes transformation, and returns home a changed person with something to help his community. This gave Lucas a narrative blueprint. Instead of inventing a story from scratch, he realized he could lean into a pattern that had already resonated with humanity for thousands of years. Campbell clarified what Lucas was instinctively trying to do. He was trying to tell a myth for the modern age. That is the basic outline, and here's how he executed it in Star Wars for the hero's journey. We first show, number 1, the ordinary world. Luke Skywalker is a bored farm boy on a desert planet. Number 2, he gets the call to adventure. A message to a couple of stranded robots from Princess Leia asking for help. But at first, he refuses the call. Luke says he can't go. He has responsibilities at home, and besides, what can he do? But then he meets his mentor. Obi-Wan Kenobi begins teaching him about the Force and helps him. He helps him cross the threshold, number 6. After his aunt and uncle are killed by the bad guys, young Luke is galvanized into action and leaves with Obi-Wan. Thus he begins his journey and then experiences, number 6, trials and allies. Luke joins Han Solo, Chewbacca, and the rebels and overcomes obstacles until, number 7, the ordeal. The group is captured aboard the Death Star. Obi-Wan sacrifices himself. At this 3/4 point, Luke begins to undergo, number 8, a transformation. Luke begins to trust the Force. But he is about to die before, number 9, the hero's final test. Using the Force, Luke destroys the Death Star and saves the rebellion. Now, a true hero, Luke, number 10, returns with the elixir. Returning back to his people, having done something that helped his community, Luke reaps the rewards and is honored by his people. In short, the farm boy leaves home, gets help from his mentor, loses his mentor, binds with allies to overcome trials and obstacles, discovers his own power, and saves the galaxy. That's the hero's journey in a nutshell. That iconic story structure is actually the pattern for everyone's journey through life. In classic myth, the hero receives the call. In most of our lives, the call to adventure may be quieter. It might be the first day of school, the job offer in a new city. You might be the young patriot joining the military, someone falling in love, losing someone you love, a medical diagnosis, becoming a parent. In my early days as a screenwriter, I was also becoming a new parent with all the anxieties that accompany that huge lifetime responsibility. In dealing with that and channeling some of my own anxiety, I wrote a gangster movie about a hardcore thug who is shocked to learn he is the father of a precocious 12-year-old girl because her mother, the love of this gangster's life, has been killed. Forced to be together, these two mismatched souls start to learn from each other and begin to bond as father and daughter on their hero's journey to find out who killed her mother. Although it never got made, That screenplay, which is still very close to my heart, helped launch my career as a screenwriter and got me a few writing jobs, got me on staffs at some TV shows. There's a reason it never got made, but I don't think I have enough time to tell you why. Anyway, that's just one example of how our ordinary lives can inspire our stories. Our call to adventure rarely feels heroic. It often feels inconvenient or terrifying. Which brings us to the second part of our varied hero's journeys, refusal and fear. In myth, heroes hesitate. They doubt themselves. They cling to the known world. So do we. We stay in comfortable jobs. We avoid difficult conversations. We delay necessary change. We tell ourselves we are not ready. But sometimes life has a way of moving us forward to the next phase. Number 3, crossing the threshold. At some point, we have to step into the unknown. We sign a lease. We start a business. We drive to California. We decide to have that surgery. We say yes. We say no. We get the courage to walk into that interview or to give a keynote address. We show up after heartbreak. This is the moment we ordinary people become heroes, though we probably don't feel like one. Number 4 is trials and tests. Our own hero's journey is never smooth. There are failures, betrayals, exhaustion. In ancient stories like the Odyssey, our hero faces monsters and storms. In modern films like The Lord of the Rings, the path is dark and costly. In real life, the monsters are a little more subtle. Self-doubt, financial strain, illness, loneliness, regret. The battles often happen internally. Getting out of bed during grief can be as heroic as slaying a dragon. Number 5, mentors and companions. No hero travels alone for long. We have teachers, friends, therapists, siblings, partners, AA sponsors. These are our mentors and allies. Sometimes they appear for a season, sometimes for a lifetime. And sometimes, unexpectedly, we become a mentor for someone else. Number 6, transformation. This is the point of this journey, is not necessarily victory over an enemy. It is the transformation of ourselves. The shy person becomes courageous. The wounded person becomes compassionate. The ambitious person becomes wise. The broken person becomes more whole. An ordinary life rarely makes headlines, but the interchanges are profound. Number 7, the return. In myth, the hero returns home with the elixir, a gift, wisdom, healing, insight. In ordinary life, the return can look like learning from our mistakes, raising a child with greater patience, offering kindness because you know pain, leading with integrity because you failed before, choosing hope over despair. The gift is who you have become. The truth is, most heroism is invisible. It is the single. Is that my cue? Somebody's going to play me off here. And, hello? Okay, I didn't think I did anything. I'm almost done. I only have a little bit. Okay. Anyway, the truth becomes invisible. It is the single parent who keeps going, the addict who chooses sobriety again just for today. It is the worker who shows up with dignity, the person who forgives, the person who begins again at age 50, or in my case, much older. It is the person who just quietly endures. The ancient storyteller around the fire and the modern screenwriter in Hollywood are telling the same story for all of us. That transformation is possible. But the greatest version of that story may not be found in Avengers: The Endgame, or in the cinema screen, or on your iPhones. It may be unfolding in your kitchen, in a hospital room, a small apartment, maybe forming in your own decisions. From what I've learned in my decades of experience is that every life is a hero's journey. We all have stories. So you, as storytellers, will always have a wealth of material to draw from. Which brings me to the last story guru I'm going to talk about. Robert McKee, who says that beyond that imagination and insight, the most important component of talent is perseverance, the will to write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. I speak from this experience. In the pursuit of some unknown perfection. Therefore, when inspiration sparks your desire to write, you should immediately ask yourself, is this idea so fascinating, so rich in possibility, that I want to spend months, perhaps years of my life in pursuit of its fulfillment? If this concept is so exciting that I will get up each morning with the hunger to write about it. If the answer is no, find another idea. Talent and time are a writer's only assets. Why give your life to an idea that's not worth your life? It took me 30 years to get Hatfields and McCoys made and turned into a miniseries. Besides the fact that my first wife's mother was a Hatfield and great-great-granddaughter of Devil Anse, and her father was Charlie McCoy, a direct descendant of family patriarch Randolph McCoy. Besides that, I had a real bone to pick with the world that previously had made fun of all of us stupid hillbillies. I was a hillbilly, goddammit, and I wasn't stupid. That term comes from our Scottish-Irish ancestors. Billy is a Scottish word for friend. So, hillbilly actually means friend from the hills. I wanted to teach people that. I wanted to bring that elixir, that healing elixir, back home from my hero's journey to Hollywood. My current project, The Grey House, Instead of 30 years, it only took me about 15 years to get it made. So now I'm on the fast track. So my next labor of love should be completed in only about half that time. So I'll see you all again in about 7 or 8 years. I guess that's why Robert McKee said that the most important advice that he could give for emerging screenwriters trying to break in is that they should go to the gym and work out. Writing burns you out. Then you have to get off your tired ass, put your script under your arm, knock on every door until your knuckles bleed. That takes the energy of a 5-year-old, the concentration of a chess master, the faith of an evangelist, and the guts of a West Virginia hillbilly, mountain man, mountain climber. So my final advice to you is find your passion, get in shape, and go write your story.
Thank you, guys.
Darrell, before you leave, we have a few minutes for a question and answer period. Does anyone have any questions for Darrell?
Yes, sir.
Hold on just a second so we can get a microphone down here so we can hear your question.
So my question is kind of speculative. When you went through Marge's office to Sam's office, do you think that first phone call was them setting you up
I
by
didn't think
firing
about
you
it.
and then being hired again?
I didn't think about it. I just needed to tell him what I thought.
No, I mean the second phone call when he called back down to the mail
Oh.
and rehired you. Did she call on her own accord, or did he have her call to
I
go,
guess-
you don't do that again?
I don't know. I mean, I told you my point of view of the story. I think probably she heard from, my friend Julie. She heard that I had done that, and so she fired me. And then Arkoff came in and said, that kid, it was just here, let's get him in the story department.
Next question. No one?
You were going to ask a question.
Years ago, I was at an event sort of like this up in New York. It was a New York Island Film Festival, and Henry Jaglom spoke. I don't know if you know Henry Jaglom.
I know it, yes.
The late, great Henry Jaglom. And he talked about the writer, producer, director, how that works, how he became a writer, producer, director, how he had to write and then take off that hat and then produce and take off that and direct. And I found that very, very compelling. And I wonder if there was someone like that at some moment in time. I know you've talked a lot about books you've read and people you've worked with, but was there one person that spoke to you, or maybe in an event sort of like this, when you walked out and you thought, I can take this nugget of knowledge and I can run with it for the rest of my life?
Well, I was working at AIP when John Milius came to direct his first movie. At that time, there was what they called Sherwood Oaks Experimental College. This is before any film school or American Film Institute or anything. And it was just some teachers going around. So this guy organized it, and he'd bring in speakers. And John came in, and I was working there, and he inspired me. And then I met him at the studio when he was making the movie. And then I met him again when I was working in the story department as a story analyst for an independent producer at Samuel Goldwyn lot. And he lost his secretary. I'd made friends with his secretary, and I came in and I goes, "Where's Marie?" And he said, "She left." I said, "Well, I have someone who would love to work for you," and I got my wife, Caroline McCoy, Fetty, working for him. So I became very good friends with him, and that's how I had a lot of my Forrest Gump moments of being at screenings and of the first movies and hanging out with George Lucas and Spielberg and all those guys. That's because I got my wife in as his personal secretary. And then I had, when I did an episode of Happy Days. In addition to all this, most people, people get confused about what you do. Are you an actor? Are you a writer? What is it? Are you a producer? What do you do? And a lot of people didn't know I was an actor, but I was guest starring on Happy Days as Frankie Molina, leader of the Dukes. And John just happened to have Spielberg and Lucas there watching it because they had thought that Happy Days was a ripoff of American Graffiti. So John got to see me act on screen, and he hired me in The Wind and Lion with Sean Connery. I got to go to Spain in one of my first feature films. So I would say John inspired me. Right now I'm trying to help him. He's had a stroke and he can't communicate anymore. So he's sort of designated me to try to rewrite or get some of his great unmade screenplays done. That was a real close relationship. Anybody else?
I got a question for you. Can you tell us a little bit about your process? Are you working on multiple screenplays at a time?
But you can only do one thing. You can only do one thing at a time. You can only focus on one. I have to clear my head when I go back to something else. It's hard for me to work on two different things in the same day. But I can work on it the next day. Meditate. As Robert McKee says, you've got to stay in shape. I go on my bicycle 20 times a day. I used to run. I don't run as much anymore. I ride my bike. I lift weights. I get on my inversion table and get upside down. So you got to stay loose. You got to stay in shape. And also that process helps clear your head so you can focus on whatever you're working on.
How many hours a day do you spend writing?
Sometimes a lot. Sometimes 10 or 12. I get up and I could write from 7 a.m., sometimes 5 or 6 a.m. until I'm just so tired I have to go to bed. Sometimes that's at 9 p.m. or sometimes at 3 a.m.
How long does it take you to get through your first draft?
It varies. It varies with subjects and what kind of notes I'm getting, what the goal is.
Any other questions?
Any other
Any other
questions?
questions?
Have you ever given up? And if you did, what did you do to remotivate yourself?
In the early stages, the reason we were going to California, I had at Marshall University, I had two friends that had gone on to New York. So I wasn't going to California to be an actor. I was going to go to New York, but I'd never really been anywhere, and I wanted to see California. So we went to California first, and every time that things looked their darkest, and I was saying, the hell with this, we were going to go to New York. And we would start planning to go to New York, and I'd get a TV acting job. That's how we ended up staying and never ended up in New York. And that's also, I got the job of reading scripts and feeling like I could write as well. So I gave up, by the way, I gave up on, I didn't give up on acting, but acting sort of gave up on me. I worked all the time, but we get older. I aged out. I was doing certain parts, and I was talking to you about the fact that with several other actors in that era, I formed a phony management company because actors weren't allowed to see the cast breakdowns for the shows. We would get the breakdowns secretly at our phony management company, and we would meet once a week and talk about, we did intel on casting directors and what was going on in studios and stuff. So we got a lot of leads on parts that way. I was working pretty regularly. One day, on the breakdown came, and it was a unique breakdown. Now, they say in actors' lives, there's 4 stages. Who is Darrell Fetty? Get me Darrell Fetty. Get me a Darrell Fetty type. Who's Darrell Fetty? On the breakdown one day, it said, a Darrell Fetty type. I called my agent. I said, somebody told me, because I couldn't tell him I'd seen it in the breakdown. Somebody told me there's listed in the breakdowns looking for a Darrell Fetty type. And he said, Darrell, you're too old for that role. So the next stage was going to be who's Darrell Fetty. And that really motivated me to write a screenplay that was going to star me. That screenplay never got made. That's a different screenplay that never got made, but it got me writing jobs. Yeah, that's a long answer to your short question.
I think we have a question over here.
Yes, sir. Here she comes.
You played in rock and roll band.
Yes, sir.
I presume you played keyboard.
I did and sang lead. I actually did a TV show where I played a rock and roll star.
And so what keyboard did you play? What instrument?
I played the B3 Hammond organ
That's what I figured.
most of the time in those days.
And you carried it yourself.
I tried. I threw my back
God help
out,
you.
threw my knees out. I also had in a movie that he talked about, Blood Beach. I played a keyboard like a guitar.
A keytar?
I don't remember what it was.
Right.
It was given to me by this guy, famous music shop in L.A. and for the show. And I also played it in different bands when I had my kind of Mad Dogs and Englishmen band, which we were called Leon Keyboard and the Billner Splashes. I was just talking to Adam about this, and it was like whatever TV star wasn't working that was really a musician as well.
Uh-huh.
And I was Lee. I had a bowling shirt that said Lee, and on the back it said the Billner Splashers. So we were Lee on keyboard, and the Billner Splashes. And we played the Troubadour, the Palomino. We played Gazzari's, Whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
We had a good time.
I bet.
And it was whatever guy showed up. And David Carradine was doing kung fu in those days. So
Right.
we would always get a crowd because we had celebrities in the band.
Right.
It was a lot of fun.
Thanks.
Any more questions? Yeah, a couple more.
Hey Darrell, as someone who moved to LA a month after turning 18, I love your story. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about your show, The Gray House, and what it's like getting a show made in 2026.
It's hard. It did take about 15 years to get Gray House. After the major success of Hatfields and McCoys, lots of Emmys, lots of numbers. The History, it wasn't History Network, it was their parent company who also handled Lifetime and a bunch of other places, wanted a female-driven historical drama. And that's when we got John Sayles to come in and write it. I wasn't going to write it. He came in and just did a great first draft. He established characters. He established that world. He knew the history of this story, which the way we found it was we had a female researcher who found the story of Elizabeth Van Loo and Thomas McNiven and his prostitute spy Clara and Mary Jane, who is a bit of a mystery herself. She toured, but she always changed her name. She was Mary Jane Richmonia, like Richmond. She was Mary Jane Bowser, Mary Jane. She had like 4 or 5 names, and she didn't leave much of a record. I think she was last seen with Harriet Beecher Stowe. She was a true spy. But anyway, after John went on to other projects, we had this thing, and it wasn't quite complete. It was wonderful, but it wasn't what Lifetime wanted, and they couldn't afford it anyway. So we got it back. Over the years, I rewrote it as a feature. I rewrote it as a mini-series. I rewrote it as an extended series. I rewrote it, and rewrote it, and with my partner, Leslie Greif. And then we had success with Kevin, and we wrestled him down and gave him the script, and he said, yeah, okay, I'll be an executive producer. There's no role for me in this, but I'll be an executive producer. We had also had interest at that time from my friend Laurie McCreary, the CEO of Morgan Freeman's company. And Morgan came on board, and he's been the sole great promoter of the show. He's appeared on a lot of shows promoting Grey House, which I'm very grateful for. And with those 2 big guns, we got to go ahead. And then, after we made it, it took us a while because at that time we had gotten the guarantee from Paramount, and Kevin Costner had pissed off Paramount pretty good by leaving Yellowstone and making his dream movie, which I wish I would have been able to help him write because, yeah, it would have been better. Horizon. He actually came to me right after Hatfields and McCoys. He said, I've got a dream project, and I'd like you to turn it into a miniseries. I said, Kevin, I'm here. And he was negotiating at that time. He made a lot of demands, and he could not, he couldn't get it made at that time. But then he had Horizon, and during those years, he was on, he had Yellowstone. He got Yellowstone because of Hatfields and McCoys, by the way. And he had never done TV before. But he started working on it just free, independent, with a guy, a buddy who was helping him. And I never got to work on it anymore, or at all, really. And over the years, he developed it and got the money and mostly financed it himself and made his dream movie. The reason, if he could get the other 2 released, it's fabulous. It's going to be great. It's just that the first movie it wasn't complete. It didn't quite hook and get the audience it should have, which happens a lot for great projects.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No more questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Darrell. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.